The thing that always strikes me is that it's when other people come and tell you what they have either seen or heard or interacted with.
What Palace insiders have just revealed about Prince Andrew and Sarah Ferguson will absolutely shock you to your core. We're talking about 72 teddy bears that had to be arranged perfectly every single morning, staff reduced to tears by violent outbursts, and bizarre rituals that sound too insane to be real. Their entire world is now collapsing, and what comes next will change the royal family forever. You won't believe what happened next.
Then I know that deep down I'm okay. So many people can write horrible things, and every day somebody writes absolutely diabolical things about me, but I know that's not me.
Prince Andrew, the Duke of York, has long been a controversial figure within the British royal family. While his public scandals have dominated headlines in recent years, those who worked closest to him paint a very different picture of life behind palace doors. According to former staff members who served at Royal Lodge, his private residence in Windsor Great Park, the Duke was far more than just difficult to work for. He was, by many accounts, demanding, temperamental, and obsessed with control in ways that went far beyond what anyone might consider normal, even by royal standards. Royal Lodge itself is an impressive property. The Grade 2 listed building sits on nearly 100 acres of private land and has been Andrew's home since 2004. It's a place of considerable luxury, with 30 rooms, manicured gardens, and all the trappings one would expect from a residence fit for royalty. But for the people employed to maintain it and serve the Duke, the lodge was less a stately home and more like a pressure cooker, where the smallest mistake could trigger an outburst, and where every detail of daily life was subject to the Duke's exacting standards. Tom Quinn, a royal author who has spent years interviewing palace staff, released a book that sheds light on what life was really like for those working in royal households. In it, he describes the experiences of maids, butlers, and other employees who served members of the family. Among all the stories he collected, some of the most eyebrow-raising came from people who had worked directly for Prince Andrew. What emerged was a portrait of a man who treated his home like a military operation, where precision was everything, and deviation from the rules was simply not tolerated. One of the most unusual aspects of life at Royal Lodge, according to multiple former employees, was the Duke's collection of stuffed animals. Reports suggest he owned around 72 teddy bears, each one meticulously dressed in miniature outfits, many of them in sailor suits and military uniforms. On its own, a grown man keeping childhood toys might seem harmless, even endearing. But what made this situation so unusual was not the collection itself, but the extraordinary lengths staff were required to go to in order to maintain it. Every single morning, before Prince Andrew entered his bedroom, staff were tasked with arranging all 72 bears on his bed in a very specific order. They had to be lined up from largest to smallest, positioned just so, with no room for error. If even one bear was out of place, or if the arrangement didn't match his expectations, staff could expect to be reprimanded. This wasn't a casual preference or a quirk that could be overlooked. It was a strict requirement, treated with the same seriousness as any other household duty. To help new employees understand exactly how the bears needed to be arranged, a laminated diagram was kept on the bedside table. This chart showed the precise placement of every single toy, down to the inch. One former palace guard who had seen the diagram during his time at Royal Lodge described it as resembling a battlefield layout, the kind of thing you might see in a military command center rather than a bedroom. The level of detail was extraordinary, and the expectation was that staff would follow it to the letter. But the routine didn't end in the morning. Every evening, once the Duke had retired for the night or left his room, the bears had to be removed from the bed and redistributed around the bedroom according to another pre-approved pattern. Some were placed on chairs, others on shelves, and a particular group of them had to be carefully stacked inside the unused fireplace. Again, there was no flexibility. The arrangement was fixed, and any deviation was noticed. For those unfamiliar with royal households, this level of micromanagement might sound absurd. To outsiders, the idea of grown adults spending part of their workday positioning stuffed animals seems almost comical. But for the staff actually living and working at Royal Lodge, it was simply part of the job. It wasn't something they could laugh about or ignore. It was a daily reminder of just how controlling Prince Andrew could be about even the most trivial aspects of his environment. Training new staff to handle the teddy bear routine became a necessity. When someone was hired to work in the Duke's household, they didn't just learn how to serve meals or press clothes. They also had to be taught the exact system for managing his toy collection. Veterans would walk newcomers through the process, pointing out which bears went where, explaining the importance of getting it right the first time, and warning them about what could happen if they didn't. It was an odd orientation, to say the least, but one that reflected the broader culture of the household. The teddy bear obsession was not an isolated quirk. It was part of a much larger pattern of behavior that defined how Prince Andrew ran his home. Former staff members have described Royal Lodge as feeling more like a military base than a family residence. There were rules for absolutely everything. His clothes had to be folded in a particular way. His shoes had to be lined up in a specific order. His breakfast had to be served at an exact time, prepared in an exact manner, and presented just so. Nothing was left to chance, and nothing was considered too small to regulate. Those who worked for him recall an atmosphere of constant vigilance. You couldn't relax. You couldn't assume that doing your job well was enough. You had to do it perfectly, every single time, because the Duke noticed everything. And if something wasn't to his liking, he wasn't shy about letting people know. Staff reported that he would openly scold employees in front of others for even minor mistakes. A misplaced item, a wrinkled shirt, a meal served a few minutes late, any of these could result in a public dressing down. What made it even harder, according to insiders, was the sense that staff were not seen as people, but as servants in the most old-fashioned sense of the word. One former employee put it bluntly, saying that Prince Andrew treated people like they were beneath him. The message was clear: you were there to serve, not to speak. Your opinions didn't matter. Your comfort didn't matter. What mattered was that everything ran exactly the way he wanted it to, when he wanted it, without question or complaint. Even senior royal aides, people with years of experience working in palace environments, privately acknowledged that Andrew's temper was well known. Many admitted that given the choice, they would rather work for almost anyone else in the family. His reputation preceded him, and it wasn't a positive one. The Duke of York was considered one of the most difficult royals to serve, and the turnover among his staff reflected that reality. At Royal Lodge, the tension was a constant presence. Former workers described a heaviness that seemed to hang in the air. Everyone was on edge, always watching what they said, always second-guessing their actions, always bracing for the Duke's mood to shift. Because that was another challenge, his unpredictability. One former staff member summed it up perfectly, saying you never knew which version of him you were going to get. He could be polite and cordial one minute, then shouting and aggressive the next. There was no way to predict it, and no way to prevent it. All you could do was try to stay out of the line of fire and hope for the best. While Prince Andrew's behavior has dominated much of the conversation around life at Royal Lodge, former staff members have also shared their perspectives on Sarah Ferguson, the Duchess of York. Her role in the household, both during her marriage and in the years following her divorce, has been complicated and often contradictory. Those who worked alongside her describe a woman who was, at times, warm and engaging, but also capable of being unpredictable and difficult in her own right. During the early years of her time in the royal family, Sarah was widely seen as a breath of fresh air. She brought energy and enthusiasm to royal engagements, often breaking with tradition in ways that endeared her to the public. Staff members from that period remember her as friendly and approachable, someone who would chat casually with employees and treat them more like equals than servants. Unlike some other members of the family, she didn't seem to take herself too seriously, and she had a natural warmth that made people feel comfortable around her. But as her marriage to Prince Andrew began to unravel and the media spotlight grew increasingly harsh, insiders say her demeanor started to change. The pressures of public scrutiny, financial troubles, and the collapse of her relationship took a visible toll. Former aides describe her as becoming more high-strung, more reactive, and less predictable in her interactions with staff. The light-hearted, easygoing woman they had known began to show a different side, one that could be demanding and, at times, hurtful. One former employee who worked closely with Sarah during this period described her as warm but temperamental. According to this individual, her mood could shift dramatically depending on the stress she was under. On good days, she could be charming and generous, making staff feel appreciated and valued. But on bad days, the pressure seemed to overwhelm her, and she could become sharp and critical. Small issues that might normally be overlooked became sources of conflict, and staff learned to gauge her mood carefully before approaching her with anything that might be seen as a problem. There are reports of specific incidents where Sarah clashed with members of the household staff over relatively minor matters. In one case, she allegedly had a heated exchange with an employee that left the staff member in tears. While the exact details of what was said remain unclear, those who were present at the time say it was a moment that shocked other workers and reinforced the sense that Sarah could be difficult to work for when things weren't going her way. Palace insiders from that era noted that while some staff found her charming and likable, others found her behavior unpredictable and exhausting. It's worth noting that Sarah Ferguson's experience in the royal family was quite different from that of Princess Diana, who joined the family around the same time. Staff who worked with both women often drew comparisons between them, and the differences were striking. Diana was consistently described as gentle, composed, and deeply considerate of the people who worked for her. She had a quiet dignity and a genuine kindness that made her beloved among palace staff. Sarah, by contrast, was seen as more impulsive and emotionally reactive. She was quick to laugh and quick to engage, but also quick to snap when she felt stressed or overwhelmed. This difference in temperament didn't make Sarah a bad person, but it did make her a more challenging person to work for. Where Diana could maintain her composure even under immense pressure, Sarah seemed to wear her emotions on her sleeve. She didn't have the same ability to compartmentalize or to keep her personal struggles separate from her professional interactions. For staff trying to navigate an already complex and hierarchical work environment, that unpredictability added an extra layer of difficulty. Despite these challenges, there are also accounts of Sarah trying to play a more positive role within the household, particularly in relation to Prince Andrew. In more recent years, after the couple had divorced but continued living together at Royal Lodge, some staff members observed that Sarah often acted as a buffer when Andrew's temper flared. She seemed to be one of the few people who could calm him down after he had lost his patience with someone. Former employees told reporters that she would sometimes step in after a shouting incident, speaking to Andrew in a way that would de-escalate the situation and prevent further conflict. One staff member noted that Sarah appeared to be the only person Andrew seemed willing to listen to when he was angry. Whether this was because of their long history together, or because she understood how to manage his moods better than anyone else, the result was the same. She became, in a sense, a mediator between the Duke and the people who worked for him. It was a role that required patience and emotional intelligence, and it's one of the reasons some staff members came to appreciate her presence at Royal Lodge, even if they found her personally difficult at times. This unusual dynamic between Andrew and Sarah defined their post-divorce relationship for nearly 2 decades. They were 2 ex-spouses, living under the same roof, bound together by history, habit, shared children, and perhaps a mutual convenience that neither was willing to give up. For Sarah, Royal Lodge represented stability and a continued connection to the royal world, even after her marriage had ended. For Andrew, having her there may have provided a sense of normalcy and companionship that he struggled to find elsewhere. From the outside, they presented themselves as the world's happiest divorced couple, a narrative they cultivated in interviews and public appearances. They spoke fondly of each other, emphasized their close friendship, and insisted that their arrangement worked perfectly for both of them. But the reality behind closed doors, according to those who witnessed it firsthand, was more complicated. Their relationship was functional, but it was also shaped by power dynamics, emotional volatility, and the peculiarities of 2 people who had been unable to fully move on from each other. Staff who worked at Royal Lodge during this period describe a household that felt frozen in time. Andrew and Sarah were no longer married, but they hadn't truly separated either. They existed in a kind of limbo, maintaining the appearance of closeness while navigating their own individual struggles. For Sarah, those struggles included ongoing financial difficulties, public embarrassment from various scandals, and the constant scrutiny of a media that had never been particularly kind to her. For Andrew, the challenges were different but equally significant, as his public reputation deteriorated and his standing within the royal family became increasingly precarious. The arrangement between them, while unusual, seemed to serve both of their needs for a long time. Sarah had a place to live and a continued association with royalty that she valued. Andrew had a companion who understood him and could tolerate his difficult personality in ways that few others could. But this delicate balance was always dependent on external factors remaining stable, particularly Andrew's position within the royal family and his access to the resources that came with it. As Andrew's scandals intensified and the palace began to distance itself from him more publicly, the sustainability of their living arrangement came into question. The removal of his military titles and royal patronages sent a clear message that his status was changing, and with it, the privileges that had allowed him to maintain his lifestyle at Royal Lodge. For Sarah, who had sold her own property believing she would be able to stay at Royal Lodge indefinitely, the implications were particularly serious. The king's determination to see Andrew move out of Royal Lodge had been building for some time. It wasn't just about the scandals or the embarrassment Andrew had caused the family. It was also about practicality and the optics of allowing a disgraced royal to continue living in such an expensive and prestigious property while contributing nothing to the monarchy's public duties. For Sarah, this meant her own future was suddenly uncertain. She had tied herself to Andrew's fortunes, and now those fortunes were collapsing. Former staff members who remained in contact with people at Royal Lodge reported that Sarah was quietly devastated by the prospect of having to leave. The residence had become her sanctuary, her last tangible link to the royal life she had once been part of. Losing it meant more than just finding a new place to live. It meant accepting that the chapter of her life connected to royalty was truly over, that the safety and status she had clung to for so long were no longer hers to claim. The arrangement that had defined Prince Andrew and Sarah Ferguson's lives for nearly 2 decades is finally coming to an end. After years of living together at Royal Lodge, despite their divorce, the couple is being forced to separate, not by choice, but by circumstances that have left them with no other option. The removal of Andrew's remaining honours and royal privileges has triggered a chain of events that will see both of them leaving the property that has been their shared home since 2004. According to sources close to the Crown Estate, Prince Andrew has been ordered to vacate Royal Lodge. The decision didn't come suddenly, but rather as the culmination of mounting pressure from King Charles, who has been keen for some time to see his younger brother relocate to more modest accommodation. The king's reasoning is both practical and symbolic. Royal Lodge is an expensive property to maintain, requiring significant upkeep and security costs that are ultimately funded by the royal purse. Allowing a family member who no longer carries out any official duties and whose reputation has become a liability to continue living in such grandeur sends the wrong message, both to the public and to other members of the family. Andrew has reportedly agreed to relocate to a private residence on the Sandringham estate in Norfolk. The property is considerably smaller than Royal Lodge and far more modest in terms of its scale and prestige. It's still a royal property, still under the control of the family, which means Andrew won't be completely cut off from the institutional support of the monarchy, but it represents a significant downgrade from what he's been accustomed to. Sandringham is also much further from London and Windsor, placing him at a greater physical distance from the centre of royal life, and making it clear that his role within the family has fundamentally changed. What makes this transition particularly significant is that Sarah Ferguson will not be joining him. For years, she has lived at Royal Lodge alongside Andrew, maintaining the fiction that they were simply good friends and co-parents who happened to share a home. But that arrangement depended entirely on Andrew's continued access to the property. Once his lease was revoked, the foundation that supported their unusual living situation collapsed, and Sarah found herself facing a future she hadn't prepared for. Earlier this year, Sarah sold her own property, a home valued at approximately £4 million. According to people familiar with her thinking at the time, she made this decision believing she would be able to continue living at Royal Lodge indefinitely. It seemed like a reasonable assumption. She and Andrew had been there for so long, and despite all the scandals and controversies, they had managed to hold on to the residence. Selling her own property would free up capital and simplify her life, allowing her to consolidate everything under one roof. But that calculation was based on a stability that no longer exists. Now, With Andrew's departure from Royal Lodge confirmed, Sarah is being forced to make her own arrangements. She no longer has the home she sold, and she can no longer rely on staying at Royal Lodge. For the first time in nearly 2 decades, she will need to find a new place to live, and she'll need to do so without the financial cushion or institutional support that came with being connected to a senior royal household. One insider close to the situation described her as quietly devastated. Royal Lodge wasn't just a house to her, it was her safe place, her last meaningful link to the royal life she had once been part of and had never fully let go of. The emotional impact of this change appears to be profound. For Sarah, Royal Lodge represented continuity and security at a time when much of her life had been marked by instability and public humiliation. Living there allowed her to maintain a connection to royalty, to present herself as still part of that world, even if only by association. It gave her a sense of belonging and legitimacy that she struggled to find elsewhere. Losing it means confronting the reality that the royal chapter of her life is truly over, that the protection and prestige she once enjoyed are gone, and that she'll need to rebuild her life on her own terms without the safety net she's relied on for so long. The separation of Andrew and Sarah after nearly 2 decades of cohabitation marks the end of an era. They had cultivated a particular image over the years, presenting themselves to the world as proof that divorce didn't have to mean animosity or distance. They spoke warmly about each other in interviews, attended family events together, and insisted that their bond remained strong. The narrative they promoted was one of mature friendship, mutual respect, and successful co-parenting. It was an image that served both of them well, allowing Andrew to appear more human and relatable, and allowing Sarah to maintain her connection to the royal family despite no longer being an official member. But that image, carefully constructed over many years, has now collapsed. The reality is that their arrangement was always fragile, dependent on Andrew's status and resources remaining intact. Once those things were stripped away, the foundation crumbled. They will now live in separate locations, Andrew in Norfolk and Sarah somewhere yet to be determined. For the first time since their divorce, they will truly be apart, forced to navigate their lives independently rather than in the comfortable partnership they had maintained for so long. Andrew's situation, while certainly diminished, still offers him some stability. He'll have a roof over his head, even if it's not the one he wanted. He'll still be on royal property, still technically within the family fold, even if his role has been reduced to almost nothing. But Sarah's situation is far more precarious. She doesn't have the same institutional backing. She doesn't have a guaranteed place to live. And she doesn't have the financial security that would allow her to simply buy whatever property she wants without carefully considering the cost. The stories that have emerged from former staff members over the years paint a clear picture of what life was like inside Royal Lodge. It was a household built on control, where power and privilege were wielded without much consideration for the people who had to live and work within that environment. Andrew's rigid rules, his obsession with detail, his volatile temper, and his treatment of staff created an atmosphere that many found oppressive and demeaning. Sarah's role was more complicated, sometimes trying to smooth things over, sometimes adding to the tension, but always caught up in the dysfunction that defined the household. For years, both Andrew and Sarah managed to maintain their united front, portraying themselves as happy and content despite everything that had happened. They hosted family gatherings, appeared together at events, and gave interviews that reinforced the idea that they had found a way to make their unusual situation work. But beneath the surface, the cracks were always there. The scandals kept coming, the public criticism never stopped, and the institutional support from the royal family grew thinner and thinner. Now that illusion has finally shattered completely. Andrew has been stripped of his status, his home, and the royal image that once protected him from full accountability. He's moving to a smaller property, further from the center of things, in a relocation that feels more like exile than choice. Sarah, meanwhile, faces an uncertain future without the royal privilege she clung to, without the financial security she once took for granted, and without the walls of Royal Lodge to shield her from the reality of her situation. What remains are the memories and testimonies of the people who worked for them, who witnessed the reality behind the carefully managed public image. Their stories reveal a household where kindness and respect were often absent, where staff were treated as invisible or disposable, and where the priorities were always about maintaining appearances and satisfying personal demands rather than creating a functional, healthy environment. Royal Lodge, once a symbol of privilege and prestige, has now become a symbol of decline, a reminder that no amount of wealth or status can protect people from the consequences of their choices indefinitely. The revelations about life inside Royal Lodge raise important questions about what really goes on behind the carefully maintained facade of royal life. For decades, the public has been fed a particular image of the monarchy, one that emphasizes duty, dignity, and service. But the accounts from staff who worked for Prince Andrew and Sarah Ferguson tell a very different story, one where privilege often came without responsibility, where power was wielded carelessly, and where the people tasked with keeping everything running smoothly were treated as little more than props in someone else's carefully staged life. What these stories really tell us is that behind the grandeur and ceremony, life in a royal household can be anything but royal. The expectations placed on staff were extraordinary, the working conditions were often difficult, and the respect they received in return was minimal at best. For those who served at Royal Lodge, the experience was defined not by the prestige of working for royalty, but by the daily reality of navigating unreasonable demands, unpredictable moods, and a culture where speaking up or pushing back simply wasn't an option. Andrew's downfall is no longer just a matter of scandal. It has become the inevitable result of years of arrogance, entitlement, and a fundamental failure to understand that privilege comes with responsibility. His treatment of staff, his obsession with control over trivial matters, and his volatile temperament were all warning signs of someone who had lost touch with reality. He operated in a bubble where his wishes were paramount and where the people around him existed solely to serve those wishes. That kind of environment was never sustainable, and the collapse we're witnessing now feels less like a sudden fall and more like the slow-motion implosion of something that was broken from the start. For Sarah Ferguson, the situation is equally revealing. She managed to maintain her connection to royal life long after her marriage ended, living in a state of limbo where she was neither fully in nor fully out. Her next move will likely determine whether she can successfully reinvent herself outside the palace system or whether she'll fade quietly into the background. Another cautionary tale of someone who never quite managed to move beyond the identity the royal family gave her. The challenge she faces now is significant. Without the institutional support, without the prestige of Royal Lodge, and without the financial cushion she once relied on, she'll need to build a life that stands on its own merits, rather than on her association with a family that has increasingly distanced itself from her. The impact of this unfolding drama extends beyond Andrew and Sarah themselves. Their daughters, Princess Beatrice and Princess Eugenie, have found themselves caught in the fallout of their parents' choices and the scandals that have engulfed the family. According to royal sources, both young women have been deeply affected by recent events and have made the decision to distance themselves from the chaos by leaving the United Kingdom entirely. This move represents a significant shift for two princesses who, until recently, maintained at least some presence in British royal life. Eugenie is believed to be spending extended periods of time in Portugal, where her husband, Jack Brooksbank, works in property management for a luxury resort development. The couple has made a life there that allows them to maintain their privacy while raising their young family away from the intense scrutiny of the British media. Portugal offers them a chance to live more normally, without the constant pressure and judgment that comes with being part of the royal family in the UK. For Eugenie, this distance may provide the breathing room she needs to process what's happening to her parents, while protecting her own children from the media circus. Beatrice, meanwhile, is understood to be dividing her time between the United States and Europe, carefully choosing locations where she can maintain a lower profile. Like her sister, she has young children to consider, and the decision to spend more time abroad appears to be motivated by a desire to shield them from the ongoing scandal and media attention surrounding their grandfather. Both sisters have worked hard to build their own identities separate from their parents, pursuing careers and creating lives that don't depend entirely on their royal status. The current situation threatens to undermine all of that work, associating them with scandal and dysfunction through no fault of their own. Royal insiders who have spoken about Beatrice and Eugenie describe them as deeply shaken by how events have unfolded. They're reportedly embarrassed by the revelations about their father's behavior, both the public scandals and the more private accounts of how he treated staff. They're also concerned about their mother's future and the uncertainty she now faces. But at the same time, they seem to recognize that they cannot fix the situation or change the trajectory their parents are on. The best they can do is protect themselves and their own families by creating distance and establishing lives that exist independently of the drama. The decision by both princesses to retreat abroad speaks volumes about just how serious the situation has become. This isn't a temporary vacation or a brief escape from media attention. This appears to be a more fundamental repositioning, a recognition that their parents' downfall has left them with no choice but to step back and reassess their relationship with the royal family and with public life in Britain more generally. For a family that once seemed relatively close-knit, the current fracturing is striking. Andrew is moving to Norfolk, Sarah is searching for a new home, and their daughters have effectively left the country. The House of York, as it was once known, has splintered in multiple directions. This fragmentation reflects the broader consequences of scandal and mismanagement. When public figures fail to uphold basic standards of decency and respect, the damage doesn't stay contained. It ripples outward, affecting everyone connected to them. Staff members who worked at Royal Lodge have had their trust violated and their dignity compromised. The King and other senior royals have been forced to manage yet another crisis that distracts from their work and damages the institution's reputation. And the next generation, Beatrice and Eugenie, find themselves paying a price for decisions they had no part in making. The future for the York family remains uncertain. Andrew will live out his days in relative obscurity on the Sandringham estate, a shadow of the influential figure he once believed himself to be. His reputation is in tatters, his standing within the family is essentially non-existent, and the protective shield of royal privilege that once insulated him from accountability has been stripped away. What's left is a man who will be remembered not for any positive contribution to public life, but for scandal, arrogance, and the mistreatment of those who served him. Sarah's path forward is less clear. She has proven herself to be resilient over the years, surviving multiple scandals and financial disasters that might have completely derailed someone else. But resilience alone may not be enough this time. She's older now, her options are more limited, and the public's patience with her has worn thin. Whether she can successfully reinvent herself, perhaps through charitable work or media projects, or whether she'll simply fade from public view, remains to be seen. What is clear is that the comfortable arrangement she enjoyed at Royal Lodge is over, and the safety net she relied on no longer exists. As for Beatrice and Eugenie, their futures will likely be defined by their ability to maintain distance from their parents' legacy while building meaningful lives of their own. They have the advantage of being less directly implicated in the scandals, and they've both worked to establish themselves as independent individuals rather than simply as Andrew's daughters. But the association remains, and it will take time and effort to fully escape the shadow cast by their family name. The story of Royal Lodge and the people who lived and worked there serves as a reminder that wealth and status don't automatically confer wisdom, kindness, or self-awareness. The accounts from former staff paint a picture of a household where those qualities were often absent, replaced by entitlement, control, and a casual disregard for the humanity of others. The departure from Royal Lodge marks the end of an era, but it also offers an opportunity for reflection on what went wrong and what lessons might be learned. What we're witnessing is not just the fall of one man or the displacement of one family. It's a broader reckoning with the idea that privilege should come without accountability, that titles and positions should protect people from the consequences of their actions, and that those who serve deserve less consideration than those they serve. The unraveling of the York family's carefully constructed image reveals the fragility of facades built on dysfunction and the inevitable collapse that comes when the foundation is rotten. As the family scatters in different directions, what remains is a cautionary tale about the true cost of arrogance, excess, and the failure to treat others with basic human decency.